The day my boss fired me was supposed to be the best day of my career. Instead, it became the day I realized the person I trusted most at work had been stealing from me for years. My name is Ethan Miller. For 8 years, I worked at a fast-growing technology company called North Star Solutions. I started there as a junior employee. I answered emails, made reports, stayed late, fixed problems nobody else wanted to deal with. Slowly, I worked my way up. By the time I turned 34, I was managing one of the company's most important accounts. My boss, Richard Cole, always told me the same thing. "You're one of the reasons this company is successful." I believed him. That was my mistake. It was a Monday morning when everything changed. Richard called an emergency meeting. Almost 20 people were sitting around the conference table. Managers, executives, team leaders. I walked in carrying my laptop. Richard was standing at the front. He looked unusually serious. "Ethan," he said. I smiled. "Morning. Sit down." Something in his voice made me stop. I took a chair. Richard closed the conference room door. Then he placed a folder on the table. "This concerns you." I looked at the folder. "What happened?" He opened it. Inside were printed emails, financial reports, and several documents. "I've discovered serious misconduct." Everyone became silent. I looked at him. "Whose?" "Yours." I actually laughed. "Mine?" Richard nodded. "You've been manipulating company records." I stared at him. "That isn't true." He pushed a document toward me. "You authorized payments to an outside company." I looked at the name. I had never heard of the company. "I didn't authorize this." Richard leaned back. "The signature is yours." I looked closer. It looked like my signature. But something was wrong. "I didn't sign this." Richard's expression hardened. "You expect us to believe someone forged your signature?" "Yes." A few people around the table looked uncomfortable. One of my colleagues, Maria, wouldn't even look at me. Richard continued. "We have evidence that you've been redirecting company funds for almost 2 years." My stomach dropped. "How much?" "Nearly $480,000. Someone gasped. I looked around the room. "This is insane." Richard stood. "You're fired." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're firing me?" "Effective immediately." He pointed toward the door. "Security will escort you out." I looked at the people around the table. Some looked shocked. Others looked away. Then I saw Maria. She was crying. That hurt more than anything. I stood. "You know I didn't do this." She didn't answer. I collected my laptop and walked out. A security guard was waiting outside. People in the hallway stared as I passed. 8 years of my life. Gone in 10 minutes. When I reached the parking lot, I sat inside my car for almost an hour. I couldn't start the engine. I kept thinking about one thing. Who would want to destroy me? Then I remembered something. 3 weeks earlier, I had discovered unusual numbers in one of our financial reports. There were several payments going to an unfamiliar company. I had mentioned it to Richard. He had told me, "Don't worry about it." I had trusted him. Now I wondered if those payments were connected to my firing. That evening, I went home and opened my personal laptop. I started searching through old emails. I found the report. The payments were real. But there was something strange. The company receiving the money had been created only 4 months before the first payment. I searched its registration. The owner was listed as Richard Cole. My boss. I stared at the screen. No, I searched deeper. The company had received almost $2.3 million from North Star Solutions. Not $480,000. More than $2 million. And suddenly, everything changed. I wasn't the thief. I had been set up. Richard had been stealing millions. And somehow, he had used my identity to hide it. I spent the entire night collecting evidence. Screenshots. Documents. Emails. Bank records. Everything I could legally access from my personal accounts. By morning, I had enough information to prove that Richard was connected to the company. But I needed more. I called Maria. She didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. Then around noon, she sent me a message. Don't call me again. I stared at it. Something was wrong. Maria had worked beside me for 6 years. She wouldn't suddenly cut me off. Unless someone had threatened her. That night, someone knocked on my door. I looked through the peephole. Maria was standing outside. I opened the door. She rushed inside. Lock it. I did. What happened? She was shaking. Richard knows you found the company. How? He has people monitoring employee accounts. What? She looked at me. He's been doing this for years. I felt sick. How long? Almost 5 years. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was scared. She handed me a small USB drive. What is this? Everything. I plugged it into my laptop. There were hundreds of files. Financial records. Internal messages. Bank transfers. Employee contracts. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. A folder named Project Echo. I opened it. Inside were photographs of employees. My photograph was there. Maria's photograph was there. Several executives. Even Richard himself. What is this? Maria shook her head. I don't know. I opened the first document. It contained notes about employees. Performance. Weaknesses. Personal problems. Financial situations. People they could pressure. People they could manipulate. Then I found my name. Ethan Miller underneath it, highly trusted. Excellent reputation. Easy to frame because he handles financial reports. My hand started shaking. The next line was even worse. Remove when project reaches final stage. Remove? Maria nodded. They weren't just trying to fire you. I looked at her. They wanted you arrested. My stomach turned. For fraud. I couldn't speak. Then Maria pointed at another folder. Open that. I did. It contained one file. Project final payment. The amount was $7.8 million. The recipient company was the same company Richard owned. But the transfer date was 3 days away. I looked at Maria. What happens in 3 days? She whispered, the biggest investment deal in North Star's history. I understood. Richard wasn't finished stealing. He planned to move another $7.8 million. And after the transfer, he intended to blame me. But there was something else. At the bottom of the file was a list of people who had approved the transaction. Richard. 2 executives. And me. My name was already there. I hadn't approved anything. Yet someone had forged my authorization. Maria looked at me. You have to stop him. I don't work there anymore. That doesn't matter. What do you want me to do? She took a breath. Go to the board. I shook my head. They won't believe me. They will if you have proof. I looked at the USB drive. For the first time since being fired, I felt something other than anger. I felt hope. The next morning, I contacted one of Northstar's board members. His name was Thomas Grant. I had never met him personally. But I knew he was known for investigating financial misconduct. I emailed him everything. The documents. The company registration. The transfers. The Project Echo files. I expected a response. Instead, I received a phone call. Thomas sounded nervous. "Where did you get this?" "From inside the company." "Does Richard know?" "I don't think so." "Listen to me carefully." His voice became serious. "Do not send anything else electronically." "Why?" "Because someone is watching your accounts." I froze. "Who?" "I don't know." Then he said something unexpected. "Come to my office tonight." "Why?" "Because I need to show you something." That evening, I arrived at Thomas's office. He was waiting alone. He closed the blinds. Then he placed a file on the desk. "This was sent to me 6 months ago." I opened it. Inside were copies of financial documents. The same transactions. The same shell company. The same names. But there was one major difference. The documents proved that Richard had been investigated before. Someone had already discovered the fraud. So why had nothing happened? Thomas looked at me. Because the person who investigated him disappeared. Who? Thomas hesitated. Then he gave me a photograph. It showed a woman standing beside Richard. I recognized her immediately. She was the company's former chief financial officer. She had supposedly resigned 2 years earlier. Thomas whispered, "Her name is Laura Bennett." "What happened to her?" "She never resigned." My blood ran cold. "She vanished." Before I could respond, Thomas's phone rang. He answered. His face changed. "Hello?" He listened. Then he slowly looked at me. "What?" He ended the call. "What happened?" He didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the window. Outside, a black SUV was parked across the street. Thomas whispered, "They know you're here." My phone vibrated. Unknown number. One message. "You should have stayed fired." Then another arrived. 3 days from now, you will take the blame for $7.8 million. I looked at Thomas. "We need to move." He nodded. But before we reached the door, the lights went out. A loud crash came from downstairs. Then another. Thomas grabbed the file. "There's another exit." We ran toward the back hallway. Behind us, someone shouted, "Find Ethan." I realized then that this was much bigger than my job. Someone had planned my downfall. Someone had already destroyed another employee. And now they were coming for me. We reached the emergency exit. Thomas opened the door. Then he stopped. A man was standing outside, holding a folder. He looked at me and smiled. "Mr. Miller?" I stepped backward. "Yes?" He held out the folder. "Your boss asked me to give you this." I didn't take it. "What is it?" The man smiled. "Your confession." Then he opened the folder. Inside was a document with my signature. And the date at the top was 3 days in the future. My blood ran cold. Because underneath my signature were 5 words, "I stole the $7.8 million. And suddenly I understood. Richard wasn't planning to fire me again. He was planning to make sure I went to prison. The man standing outside Thomas's office held the folder toward me. "Your confession." I didn't touch it. Thomas stepped in front of me. "Who are you?" The man smiled. Someone who was asked to deliver a message. What message? He looked at me. Richard says you have until tomorrow morning to disappear. My heart started pounding. Tell Richard something for me. The man raised an eyebrow. What? I'm not running. His smile disappeared. You should. Then he turned and walked away. Thomas locked the door behind him. I looked at the folder. The document inside had my signature. It looked perfect. But there was one problem. I knew exactly when the signature had been stolen. 6 months earlier, I had signed a blank authorization form for an unrelated company project. Richard had been in the room. I had never thought twice about it. Now I realized what he had done. He had kept the document. He had copied my signature. And he was going to use it to make the $7.8 million theft look like my crime. Thomas looked at me. We need to find Laura. The former CFO? Yes. If she's alive, she may be the only person who can prove Richard has done this before. We searched every record we could access. Old addresses. Employment records. Company documents. Nothing. Then Thomas remembered something. Laura had a brother. What was his name? Michael Bennett. We found him living in a small town 3 hours away. We drove there that night. Michael opened the door and immediately became suspicious. I don't talk about my sister. We're not here to hurt her. He looked at Thomas. Then why are you here? Because we believe she's alive. Michael's face changed. What did you say? We found evidence that she never resigned from North Star. He stepped aside. Come in. We sat in his living room. Michael brought out an old box. My sister sent this to me 2 years ago. Inside were letters, photographs, and a small notebook. He handed me the notebook. On the first page, Laura had written, "If anything happens to me, Richard Cole is responsible." I turned the page. There were dates. Bank transfers. Employee names. And one sentence that made my stomach drop, "Richard doesn't work alone." I looked at Michael. Who else? He shook his head. She never wrote the name. Then I found a folded piece of paper hidden inside the notebook. There was an address. A hotel. And beneath it, room 214. We drove there immediately. The hotel was almost empty. The receptionist gave us a strange look when we asked about room 214. That's been vacant for months. Thomas looked at me. We went upstairs. The door was locked. Michael had given us an old key from Laura's belongings. It worked. Inside was a small room. Nothing unusual. A bed. A desk. A broken lamp. Then I noticed something under the mattress. A phone. Old. But still charged. We turned it on. There was one recorded video. I pressed play. Laura appeared on the screen. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were red. If you're watching this, I failed to expose Richard. Thomas leaned closer. Laura continued. Richard has people inside the company, but he's not the person making the final decisions. I froze. There is someone above him. She paused. Someone on the board. The video ended. Thomas looked at me. We need to know who. Then the phone received a message. Stop searching. A second message appeared. Or Laura disappears forever. I stared at the screen. She's alive. Thomas nodded. But where? Then another message arrived. Tomorrow. 8 a.m. North Star headquarters. Come alone. I immediately knew it was a trap. But it was our only lead. The next morning, I returned to North Star. Thomas stayed nearby with the police. I entered through the main lobby. People stared at me. 3 days ago, I had been escorted out. Now I was walking back in. Richard was waiting in the conference room. He looked calm. Almost relaxed. "Ethan." I sat across from him. "You framed me." He smiled. "You're emotional. You stole millions. You can't prove it." "I can." His smile faded. I placed the USB drive on the table. "I have everything." Richard leaned forward. "You think that little drive will save you?" "No," I looked directly at him. "The people you thought were loyal to you will." His expression changed. "You don't know what you're dealing with." "I know enough." He stood. "You have no idea how many people are involved." "Then tell me." He laughed. "You think this is about $7.8 million? What is it about?" "Control." He walked toward the window. "Companies like North Star aren't controlled by people like me." "Then who controls them?" He turned. "You'll meet him soon." The door opened. A man entered. I recognized him immediately. Thomas had shown me his photograph. He was one of North Star's board members. Victor Hale. The same man who had approved several suspicious payments. The person above Richard. Victor sat down. "You've caused us a lot of trouble." I stared at him. "You ordered the fraud?" He smiled. "Fraud is such an ugly word. You stole millions. We moved money. You destroyed people's lives. Collateral damage." I felt anger rising. "Where is Laura?" Victor's smile disappeared. "You won't see her." Then the conference room door opened again. 2 men brought Laura inside. She was alive. But she looked weak. I stood immediately. "Laura." She looked at me. "Ethan," Victor raised his hand. "Sit down." I sat. Victor placed a document in front of me. "Sign this." I looked at it. It was the confession. The same one from the folder. "You want me to admit I stole $7.8 million? Yes. And then? You disappear from our lives." I laughed bitterly. "You're threatening me with prison." "No," Victor leaned closer. "We're offering you a choice." "What choice?" "Take the blame, or your friend Maria gets charged too." My blood ran cold. "Maria?" Victor smiled. "She helped you access the records. She didn't steal anything." "We know." "Then why threaten her?" "Because people become cooperative when they have something to lose." I looked at Laura. She shook her head. "Don't sign." Victor stood. "Your decision." I picked up the pen. Richard watched me. Victor smiled. I signed. For 1 second, everyone relaxed. Then I put the pen down. "Thank you." Victor frowned. "For what?" "For confirming everything." I stood. Richard looked confused. "What did you do?" I smiled. "The pen." Victor looked at it. I had used a recording pen. Every conversation in the room had been recorded. Thomas had placed it in my pocket before I entered. The police were already listening. Victor's face went pale. Then the conference room doors opened. Police officers rushed inside. "Victor Hale, you're under arrest." Richard tried to run. 2 officers stopped him. Laura began crying. I stood completely still. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. But then one officer approached me. "Mr. Miller, there's something else." What? We found the person who authorized the original shell companies. Who? He handed me a photograph. It was Maria. I stared at it. No, the officer nodded. She has been working with Richard. I couldn't believe it. Maria had warned me. She had given me the USB drive. She had risked everything. Why would she betray me? Then the officer continued. She wasn't working for Richard voluntarily. What do you mean? She was undercover. I felt a wave of relief. Maria had been helping investigators for almost a year. She had pretended to work for Richard so she could collect evidence. That explained everything. The tears. The strange messages. The warning. She had been trying to protect me. 2 weeks later, the investigation became national news. North Star's financial records were exposed. Millions of dollars were recovered. Victor Hale was charged. Richard Cole was charged. Several other executives were arrested. Laura testified against them. And my name was completely cleared. But there was one thing I couldn't forget. The day Richard fired me. The humiliation. The fear. The feeling that 8 years of hard work had disappeared in 10 minutes. A month later, I was invited back to North Star. Not as an employee. As the new head of financial compliance. The board offered me the position. I almost laughed. The same company where I had once been called replaceable was now asking me to rebuild the department. I accepted. Not because I needed the job. Because I wanted to make sure nobody else was destroyed the way I had been. On my first day back, I walked into the same conference room where Richard had fired me. Everyone was standing. The new CEO looked at me. "Welcome back, Ethan." I looked around the room. Then I smiled. 3 weeks earlier, I had walked out of that room believing my career was over. Now I was walking back in with more power than I had ever had. Maria approached me afterward. "Are you okay?" I smiled. "I am now." She laughed. "You know what Richard said about you?" "What?" "He said you were replaceable." I looked toward the empty chair where Richard used to sit. Then I shook my head. He was right. Maria looked surprised. I smiled. Anyone can be replaced. I picked up my files. But not everyone can be rebuilt. And that became the lesson I carried with me. Losing my job felt like the worst thing that had ever happened to me. Being publicly humiliated felt unbearable. Being accused of stealing nearly $500,000 nearly destroyed me. But sometimes life takes something away because it is making room for something better. Richard thought firing me would silence me. Instead, it gave me the freedom to discover the truth. He thought I was replaceable. He was wrong. I wasn't replaced. I was rebuilt.